In the previous episode, we saw how Apollo 10 brought NASA right to the edge of making history. Every step, from the tragic loss of Apollo 1 to the successes of Apollo 8, 9, and 10, had led to this moment. After years of hard work, it all came down to this: Apollo 11, the mission that would finally land humans on the moon, the mission that had to succeed. The giant Saturn V rocket stood on the launch pad, ready to carry 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, into the unknown. The world was watching, holding its breath. The moment had arrived. The final test. The first moon landing was about to begin. The moment has finally come. Every step, every mission, every challenge faced before this moment had led to this. Apollo 11 wasn't just another spaceflight. It was the culmination of years of relentless effort, sacrifice, and determination. From the tragedy of Apollo 1 to the lessons of Apollo 7, each mission had been a stepping stone, refining the spacecraft, perfecting the procedures, and preparing the people who would take on this impossible dream. Apollo 8 had proven that humans could reach the moon, orbit it, and return safely. Apollo 9 tested the lunar module, ensuring it could operate in space. Apollo 10 brought it within a whisper of the lunar surface, rehearsing every maneuver but stopping just short of the landing. Now, Apollo 11 would bring it all together. NASA left nothing to chance. The engineers scrutinized every system, checking and rechecking every bolt, wire, and circuit. They simulated countless scenarios, preparing for everything that could go wrong. The astronauts trained relentlessly, running through landing simulations until they could do them in their sleep. Every misstep in training was analyzed, every success measured against the ultimate goal. And for this mission, they needed the perfect crew. Neil Armstrong, a pilot with nerves of steel, a man who had survived near-death experiences in test flights and never lost his focus. Buzz Aldrin, a brilliant mind with a PhD in orbital mechanics whose precise calculations could mean the difference between success and failure. Michael Collins, a skilled command module pilot, tasked with ensuring their way home remained secure as his crewmates descended to history. Everything was ready. Years of preparation, billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of minds, all working toward one goal: landing a human on the moon. And now, standing tall against the Florida sky, Saturn V loomed over the launch pad, the most powerful rocket ever built, waiting to ignite the next chapter in human history. The world held its breath. Humanity's greatest mission was about to begin. The morning of July 16, 1969 was unlike any other. After years of preparation, the time had finally come. The Saturn V rocket stood tall, ready to carry humanity to a new frontier. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts sat strapped into their seats, the weight of history pressing down on them. Over 6 million pounds of fuel lay waiting for ignition, ready to launch them beyond Earth's grasp. The world was watching. Over 500 million people held their breath as the final countdown began.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
From Kennedy Space Center, July 16, 1969, at 9:32 a.m. EDT, Saturn V rocket made its liftoff. A deafening roar filled the air as Saturn V came to life, fire and smoke billowing beneath it. Slowly, almost impossibly, the rocket began to rise. The ground shook, the air trembled, and with each second, the spacecraft climbed higher, breaking free from Earth's grip. The astronauts felt the force of gravity pushing them into their seats as the rocket accelerated, their bodies pressed down by the sheer power of the launch. Higher and higher through the thick atmosphere, past the point where any aircraft had ever gone, until at last, silence. They had escaped Earth. The journey had begun. 3 men, 4 days, and one destination, the moon. As Apollo 11 continued its journey, the astronauts adjusted to life in space. The weightlessness was both a marvel and a challenge, requiring them to carefully control their movements. Every action, from eating their specially prepared meals to handling equipment, had to be done with precision. Even the simplest tasks, like drinking water, required using pouches with straws to prevent liquid from floating away. NASA had meticulously planned for every necessity, including waste management. Astronauts had to use specially designed collection systems, an uncomfortable but necessary part of the mission. As the spacecraft climbed higher, it underwent a series of crucial separations, each marking a step toward the moon. The first stage, powered by 5 massive F-1 engines, had done its job, burning for about 2.5 minutes before detaching and falling back to Earth. The second stage then ignited, carrying Apollo 11 further into space. This stage burned for about 6 minutes before it too was discarded. The third and final stage, the SIVB, then took over, placing the spacecraft into Earth's orbit. For a brief moment, Apollo 11 was coasting, giving the crew and mission control time to confirm that everything was functioning as expected. After nearly 2.5 hours in orbit, it was time for the critical translunar injection, or TLI. The SIVB fired once more, accelerating Apollo 11 to the necessary speed to escape Earth's gravity and begin its journey to the moon. This maneuver had to be executed with absolute precision. Any deviation could mean missing the moon entirely, or being stranded in space. Once TLI was complete, the third stage was jettisoned, leaving only the command and service module and the lunar module still attached for the time being. During the journey, the crew conducted routine system checks, monitored their trajectory, and even took moments to capture the beauty of Earth against the vast blackness of space. Each task brought them closer to their goal, but space travel was never without risks. Even the smallest miscalculation could mean disaster. Yet, with precision, training, and determination, the crew pressed forward, preparing for the next critical phase, entering lunar orbit, one step closer to making history. As Apollo 11 approached the moon, the mission entered one of its most crucial and nerve-wracking phases, lunar orbit and the separation of the lunar module, Eagle. Up to this point, every step had gone according to plan, but now, the astronauts had to execute one of the most critical maneuvers of the entire journey. After 3 days of travel, the spacecraft fired its service propulsion system, SPS engine, slowing it down just enough to be captured by the moon's gravity. As the astronauts looked out of their windows, they saw the moon's surface up close, gray, barren, and filled with craters. It was an awe-inspiring yet intimidating sight. Now they had to prepare for the next step. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed into the lunar module, Eagle, while Michael Collins remained in the command module, Columbia. The lunar module was small, cramped, and built for one purpose: landing on the moon. But before that could happen, Eagle had to separate from Columbia. This was a delicate moment. If the separation system failed, the landing would be impossible. Collins double-checked every command as Armstrong and Aldrin prepared for detachment. With a command, the explosive bolts fired, and Eagle slowly pushed away from Columbia. But there was a moment of uncertainty. Had the separation worked perfectly? For a brief period, mission control and the astronauts were unsure whether Eagle had properly detached. If something had gone wrong, Armstrong and Aldrin might have been stuck, unable to proceed with the landing. However, as Eagle drifted further away, all systems confirmed a clean separation. The relief was immense. Now Armstrong and Aldrin were alone, descending toward the moon. Every move had to be precise. The world watched as Eagle began its slow, careful descent. The next step was the most daring of all, the first attempt to land humans on the lunar surface. As the lunar module, Eagle, began its descent, Armstrong and Aldrin braced for the most critical and dangerous part of the mission. The world held its breath as they drifted away from Columbia, leaving Michael Collins alone in orbit. This was the moment everything had led up to, the first attempt to land humans on the moon. As they descended, alarms suddenly blared inside the cabin, 1202 and 1201 program alarms. In an instant, uncertainty filled the spacecraft. Had something gone wrong? Was the landing in jeopardy? Mission Control in Houston quickly analyzed the situation. The alarms indicated the guidance computer was overloaded with data but was still functional. The decision was made: proceed with the landing. Armstrong and Aldrin stayed calm under pressure, trusting their training and the engineers who had worked tirelessly for this moment. With the alarms behind them, Armstrong focused on the descent. The lunar module's automated guidance system was steering them toward the planned landing site until Armstrong looked out the window. What he saw made his heart pound. The designated site was littered with massive boulders and unsafe terrain that could spell disaster if they continued on course. Taking manual control, Armstrong guided Eagle away from the hazardous area. Every movement had to be precise, every adjustment carefully measured. Fuel was running low, far lower than expected. Alarms began to warn of the dwindling reserves. If he couldn't find a safe landing spot soon, they would have to abort. The pressure was immense, but Armstrong remained focused, scanning for a smooth area to land. With just seconds of fuel left, Armstrong spotted a relatively flat surface. He gently eased the lunar module down, dust kicking up as the descent engine roared. The tension inside the spacecraft and at mission control was unbearable. Finally, contact light illuminated. The lunar module had touched down. Armstrong radioed the words that confirmed history had been made.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Cheers erupted at Mission Control, but the mission wasn't over yet. They had landed, but now came the next challenge, the first human steps on the moon. With the lunar module safely on the surface, the world waited for the historic moment. After final checks and preparations, Neil Armstrong made his way down the ladder. Millions watched as his boot pressed into the moon's powdery surface, marking the first human step on another world.
That's one small step for man,
Those words would be etched into history forever. Buzz Aldrin soon followed, joining Armstrong on the surface. He described the landscape as a magnificent desolation, a barren, otherworldly place untouched by time. Together, they looked around at the strange gray landscape. The ground was covered in fine dust, and the sky was completely black. There was no air, no sound, only the distant view of Earth shining like a blue marble in the sky. The astronauts moved carefully, testing how to walk in the moon's weak gravity. Every step felt like bouncing. At one point, Aldrin tried to move too quickly and fell flat on his face. Getting up wasn't easy, but he laughed it off and kept going. They planted the American flag, but because there was no wind, it stayed still, held up by a rod. As they stepped back, the flag wobbled slightly, making it look like it was waving. It was a small but powerful symbol of their achievement. Despite the surreal experience, they had work to do. They collected rock and soil samples, hoping to unlock secrets about the moon's origins. They deployed scientific instruments, including a seismometer to measure moonquakes and a retroreflector to help scientists on Earth precisely measure the distance between the two celestial bodies. The experiments would provide invaluable data for future lunar missions. After over 2 hours of exploration, it was time to return to the lunar module. Their footsteps would remain undisturbed for millions of years, a silent testament to human ambition and the courage it took to reach beyond our world. After spending 2 hours on the moon, it was time to leave. Armstrong and Aldrin climbed back into the lunar module, brushing off as much lunar dust as they could. It clung to everything. They spent around 7 hours inside Eagle, most of that time resting, completing final preparations, and ensuring the ascent engine was ready for liftoff. In total, they had spent over 21 hours on the moon. They sealed the hatch and prepared for liftoff. But as they moved around, Aldrin accidentally knocked into a circuit breaker, the one that controlled the ascent engine. It snapped off. For a moment, everything stopped. Without that switch, they couldn't fire the engine. If they couldn't fire the engine, they would never leave the moon. The control room on Earth had no solution, no backup switch, no easy fix. The astronauts had to improvise. Carefully, Aldrin reached for a felt-tip pen, held his breath, and pushed the broken circuit back into place. It held. The ascent engine was back online. With everything checked and ready, it was time for the most critical moment. If the lunar module's engine failed now, there was no second chance. The countdown began. Then, ignition. A bright burst of fire sent the Eagle flying upward, leaving behind the first human footprints on another world. The lunar module climbed higher, escaping the moon's gravity. Above them, Michael Collins waited in Columbia, orbiting alone for over a day. As Eagle approached, the docking had to be perfect. Any mistake, and they could be stranded in space. But everything went smoothly. With a solid clunk, the two spacecraft locked together. The crew was finally reunited. Now, with the moon shrinking behind them, they began their long journey back to Earth. Though the major dangers were behind them, space travel was never simple. Small technical issues, course corrections, and the constant reality that anything could go wrong kept them on edge. But Apollo 11 had come too far to fail now. The next challenge awaited them, the fiery return to Earth. The journey home was nearly complete, but one final challenge remained. Re-entry. After days in space, after walking on the moon, after witnessing the Earth from a distance no human had ever seen before, it all came down to this moment. If their calculations were off, even by a fraction, if the heat shield failed, if anything went wrong, they wouldn't make it back. As Columbia approached Earth, the crew braced for the most dangerous phase of their journey. Traveling at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, they were about to slam into Earth's atmosphere, where temperatures would soar to over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The command module's heat shield was their only protection. If it failed, there was no second chance. Then came the worst part, the radio blackout. As the spacecraft tore through the atmosphere, superheated plasma built up around it, cutting off all communication with mission control. For 3 long minutes, the world waited in silence. No voices, no signals, just an empty void. Inside the module, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins could do nothing but trust the shield and wait. The cabin shook violently, the force of re-entry pressing them into their seats. If their angle was too steep, they would burn up, too shallow, and they would skip off the atmosphere into the void of space. Back on Earth, the tension in mission control was unbearable. Then, suddenly, a crackle, a voice. Columbia had survived re-entry. The parachutes deployed perfectly, slowing their descent. Through the windows, the astronauts saw the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean rushing toward them. With a final, powerful splash, Apollo 11 hit the water. They had done it. They had survived the impossible. After 8 days in space, after setting foot on another world, after risking everything, they were home. The mission was over, but its impact had just begun. As the Apollo 11 crew floated in the Pacific, rescue teams moved swiftly. A helicopter approached, carrying divers who secured the capsule and helped the astronauts out. But before they could celebrate, there was one final precaution: quarantine. No one knew if the moon held unknown microbes, so Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins were placed in isolation for 21 days. From behind glass, they waved to their families and spoke to the world. But outside their quarantine, the world was celebrating like never before. From From New York to London, from Tokyo to Moscow, the streets were alive with joy. The greatest achievement in human history had just unfolded before their eyes. Parades filled cities, newspapers printed bold headlines, "Men walk on moon." It was more than just an American victory. It was a triumph for all of humanity. Yet for the United States, Apollo 11 meant something even more. The space race, fueled by Cold War rivalry, was now over. The Soviets had been first in many milestones. The first satellite.
On October the 4th, 1957, while the Americans were still finalizing their plans, Sputnik was launched.
The first man in space. But this was the ultimate prize. America had won. Still, Apollo 11 was more than a victory in competition. It was proof of what was possible when humanity dared to dream. The moon landing inspired a generation of scientists, engineers, and explorers. It showed that with determination, no frontier was too far, no challenge too great. Neil Armstrong's words,
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
were more than a statement. They were a promise that we would continue to explore, to push the boundaries, to look beyond our world and into the stars. Apollo 11 was not the end, it was just the beginning. With this, the mission was over. From the tragedy of Apollo 1 to the triumph of Apollo 11, every step, every challenge, and every sacrifice led to this moment. The dream of landing on the moon was no longer just a dream, it was history. But this isn't the end of the Apollo story. There were still more missions to come, from Apollo 12,
0. All engines running. Commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff. 11:22 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
to Apollo 17,
Started. All engines are started. We have ignition. 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff. We have a liftoff, and it's lighting up the areas. It's just like daylight here at Kennedy Space Center as the Saturn V is moving off the pad. It has now cleared the tower.
each pushing the boundaries of exploration even further, and we'll cover them all. So stay tuned, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.